Welcome to our study in the book of the Revelation of Jesus Christ. Today, we'll not be looking into a chapter, but we're going to be looking at a couple of chapters. And we have sort of a sidebar lesson called Babylon the Great. So hang with me and let me give you some history on Babylon and where this came from. Babylon is from the Akkadian Babili and the Arabic, which is very close, Babil. The English Babylon comes from the Greek Babylon. It's a transliteration of the Akkadian Babili. A little bit of history that you're not going to read here, but pick up. I mentioned the Akkadians. The Akkadian civilization was very dominant in the region, and it was replaced by the Assyrians. The Assyrians were replaced by the Babylonians, or by Babylon. All three of those nations existed at the same time, but were not as great. And as the Akkadians were beat, they died off. Then the Assyrians pretty much did the same thing, and that left Babylon at the very end there. It means the gate of the God, or gate of God, or the gateway of the God. The literal meaning of the word Babylon is confusion, though it was a last name given to Babel, which was the capital city of Babylonia in Mesopotamia. Babylon was one of the splendid cities of the ancient world. There's a lot of archaeological digs going on now in Iraq. That's where Babylon was and would be today, and is. Saddam Hussein started rebuilding the city while he was still alive. After his death, it stopped for a bit, but then archaeological digs have continued as well as rebuilding. This is just a schematic and a model of what the city once looked like. They did not add a lot of color. You can see the green palm trees around the bottoms. You can see the Euphrates River. There's Babylon with the blue arrow when it was at its heyday. Also, here is a literal plat of what the ancient city looked like. Notice that the Euphrates River went right through it, but also notice that they learned to irrigate it out around the main city as another wall of protection. And then you see, as you come to the far bottom of the plat, you can see once again there's an irrigation going to the upper right, and then a little one at the upper right-hand corner. So those were outer fortresses. They knew how to navigate, and they knew how to use the river well. The Akkadian Empire was around 2300 before Christ. It was the major city in Mesopotamia between the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. Actually, it was built on the Euphrates River and divided on both the banks. Hammurabi, from 1810 to 1750 BC, was the sixth king. The Hammurabi Code is the Code of Hammurabi is what is spoken of today, very famous. It comprises of 282 written laws and regulations about agriculture, marriage, industries, governance, lands, properties, and a whole bunch of other things. And here are statues as well as carvings of him into stone. And there are pieces of his code that have been found. During Hammurabi's life, 800 miles away, as the camel flies, a promised child was born to a great herdsman. And so while Hammurabi was alive, Isaac was born to Abraham and Sarah over in the Promised Land. The major motto of Hammurabi's code was a tooth for a tooth and an eye for an eye. Sound familiar? All we've done is flipped it, and then somebody's taken a credit for saying that. But that comes from Hammurabi's code. The Code of Hammurabi even today is used as the foundation of several laws and regulations around the world. The Babylonian military used to comprise of well-trained soldiers. So we look at their military strength. It was immense. As we would read through the Old Testament prophets that lived right before the fall of Jerusalem, of Judah, we would read through Jeremiah and Haggai and others. Isaiah even had prophecies way back as far as he was about a swift, strong, mighty fortress, incredible army. They drug their fortresses along with them. Their war machines, they brought them and they traveled quickly. They had an administrative unit of seniors from the upper class people who served as judges, also known as Amalu. So those were their judges that they came from their senior population. The decisions they made were mostly influenced by the Code of Hammurabi. The Babylonians were very good in record keeping. They used to record all the verdicts from the judges for future references. Also, they recorded everything that went on in the throne room before the kings. Anything that the king said, any laws, any rules, they were all recorded. They had libraries. Babylon was a very liberal place, though, for women. Unlike other societies, the Babylonian culture allowed their women to be priests. Women were free to sell wine and set up their very own business. A Babylonian woman could ask her husband to support her for life, and she could also ask for a dowry from her father. In addition, she had the rights to the properties of her husband after his death. And even today, that is something that would be incredible for many nations today. If the husband dies, the wife gets nothing. The Babylonian history shows that they worshiped Sumerian gods and goddesses. Marduk was their greatest god. However, Baal was not far behind, as was Ashtaroth. And it would be all these Marduk, as well as Baal and Ashtaroth, were the two main gods, and Ashtaroth is a goddess, that the Israelites were always having problems with. The regular attacks from Kassites, followed closely by the Hittites, resulted in the decline of ancient Babylon. So their golden age spanned from the Assyrians, who, when they had conquered Babylon, they rebuilt Babylon. And then the Assyrians reigned out of Babylon for a while, although they had two capitals, Nineveh, the main one, Babylon, the second one. And so the golden era lasted through King Nebuchadnezzar and King Belshazzar. After that, under Belshazzar, it fell to the Medo-Persian Empire. The Babylonians were the first people to bring in the concept of a sales contract. They also introduced the idea of signing it, too. This is a little bit of the artwork of what they know to be actual walls that they will be rebuilding, and they will be painting them back to this color. They're recreating the city. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon were amongst the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Those spectacular gardens were actually created for a homesick king's wife. She yearned for the garden plants of her motherland. Unfortunately, the gardens were all ruined right after the earthquakes in the 2nd century before Christ. This would be during the Silent Years. This is definitely a computer generator. It looks like Legos if you look carefully, but it is not. But it's larger pixels. But again, they recreated what they have found and have put together of the ruins, and then it's oftentimes a computer can fill in the blanks. Their entire civilization is found not in their ancient libraries, but on their rocks everywhere, on pillars, in their architecture. The bottom right and the upper left are actual ruins that have been dug up, and those are walls. Babylonian art was one of its kind. Ancient Babylonians introduced jewelry into the world. They made good use of precious gems and metals to design their jewelry. And needless to say, they were extraordinary jewelry makers. Look at some of this. These are all earrings up above, and there's a necklace below. The single greatest individual to impact the Babylonian civilization was Daniel. And Daniel never went home. He was buried in Babylon. That is his burial place. The name or the word Babylon is mentioned 290 times in the Bible, 260 of those times in the Old Testament, and only 30 in the New. Babylon is mentioned in Daniel 17 times. In Revelation, it is mentioned 6 times. Daniel is the main bridge to Revelation. And so I left off going into chapters 17 and 18 of Revelation because it mentions Babylon a lot. And those 2 chapters are dedicated to certain areas of the rise of the Babylonian Empire under Antichrist. See, many feel that Babylon never was totally destroyed and wiped out forever. Did you remember I read to you about the Hanging Gardens of Babylon being destroyed in the 200s before Christ? Well, Babylon was no longer a world empire. Persia, the Medes and the Persians had faded, and the Romans were taking over shortly thereafter. But Babylon still was there and still existed. And the scripture tells us it will rise again. Isaiah said that Babylon never was destroyed. The only time it will be is in the latter days. That would be the times of the Great Tribulation. Wonder what we're going to be reading about here shortly. So keep in mind, and if you want to know and see the bridge from Daniel to the book of Revelation, go back and read Daniel. But then be with us and stick with us here through chapters 17, 18, and of course 19, where we see an awful lot of wrap-up of mankind in the Battle of Armageddon. So I want to thank you for tuning in. This is where you can find me, If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email me. I'd love to hear from you. If you have a question, I'll answer it best as to my ability, and I do not keep your email. So until we get to next week, we'll be beginning chapter 17, and it's going to be a dynamic time. God bless you, and I'll see you for the next chapter.